Okay. Good morning, Saints.
Good morning.
Are you all happy?
Happy.
Can I see some tea? Thank you very much. That makes me feel so much better. Okay, so my name is Richard Gayle. I'm a herbalist. I know that on the sheet it said a medical missionary. I wish, but I'm not. I'm a clinical herbalist, but I'm going to share with you today my knowledge in some aspects of herbalism and introduce you guys to some of the areas of herbalism that you might not have already been familiar with. Okay? Yeah, I'm going to try and make it kind of interactive. So I'm going to look at each of you. I'm going to make eye contact with some of you. So do make me feel comfortable and respond, associate in accordance, okay? Before I go any further, we're going to have a quick word of prayer. Okay, so eyes closed, hands bowed. Most gracious, loving Heavenly Father, I thank you for your grace and your mercy. I ask you, dear Father, to be with us today as we speak about your natural pharmacy. Dear Father, enlarge our memories and our minds and open our hearts, dear Father, that we may embrace what you have given to us. Let not be my words, dear Father, but let your words and your message come through to those that need to know. So bless us and keep us now. These mercies I pray in your most humble holy name. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, so yeah. So by the end of today's session, I'm going to give you a brief, or you will have a brief knowledge of the history of herbs, some of the terminology that we use for herbalism, and also something called the doctrine of signatures. Is anybody familiar with the doctrine of signatures? Yeah? Is anybody? No? Okay, that's fine. And basically we'll have a better understanding of how to identify certain herbs. Okay? Okay, so vital force. God has endowed us with a certain amount of vital force or vital energy. He's formed us with organs suited to maintain various functions. And those various functions are various functions that give us the ability to live life on a day-to-day basis. Okay? He's designed these organs to work together in harmony. All right? If we carefully preserve the life force and keep the life force, this delicate life force in balance, the end result is health. However, if the vital force is rapidly exhausted or squandered, then the nervous system, the central nervous system, will borrow power for present use and also reduce its resources for strength. So when the organ, any part of your body is injured, if one organ is injured, the whole body is affected. Nature bears much of the abuse without apparent resistance. She arouses and makes a determined effort to remove the effects of the ill treatment. Her efforts to correct the conditions often manifest in a fever or another type of disease. Okay, there's somebody called Hippocrates, and he said, give me a fever and I will cure any disease. Your body has a natural bank of resources that it uses to detox itself and to support everyday actions. Spirit of Prophecy tells us that the first health reform vision that Ellen G. White received was in June 1963. And what was relayed to her was the great subject of health reform. She was shown that intemperance would be a huge issue in the later days. God's people must take a stand in the reformation of habit and practices. What do we mean by habit and practices? The things that we do on a regular basis, we do to the honor and the glory of God. The things that we practice, as an example, when I play table tennis, my trainer used to say to me, you play the way you practice and you practice the way you play. If you have a very blasé attitude to your practice, then your practice will demonstrate flaws. But if you practice the way that you play, then your game will be on point. at all times. And that will be your second nature. Do you all understand that? Okay. In order to know what is the best food for man, we have to go back to God's original plan. The Lord has presented a plan for his commandment-keeping people, which is a diet of reform. And if we adhere to that diet, disease and suffering will be greatly reduced. The question I would ask you is, how many of you know people in your own church circle that are suffering with regular, mild health challenges, and others that are suffering from major health challenges? Many times, the Proverbs tells us that the disease, nothing happens without a cause. I can't remember the text. The disease causeless. Thank you very much, sister. Sorry, repeat that for me again. The cause.
The needless cause, doesn't it? Or is it the cause needless? The cause.
The curse caused shall not come. Right. So basically, if we are looking after ourselves in the early days, the disease or the issues, the health challenges will not be an issue for us. So the original diet for man was Genesis 1:29. God said, I have given you every herb-bearing seed which is upon the earth, and every tree in the which is the fruit of the tree, yielding seed. To you, it shall be for meat. Okay. So note this point. The original diet in Genesis, was it a meat-based or a plant-based? Okay. So in contrast, the Leviticus diet that we have was a meat-based, was the introduction of a meat-based diet and lifestyle, but it came with strict guidelines. Would you say that we've followed those strict guidelines in this day and age? No. Okay. So, disclaimer, as I mentioned before, I'm a clinical herbalist and I offer guidance and recommendations based on traditional knowledge and contemporary research. However, my suggestions are not intended to replace professional medical advice or treatments. It's important for you to consult with a medical healthcare, a qualified healthcare practitioner before making any significant changes to your health regime, especially if you have underlying medical conditions or you're taking medication. So my role is to support and to educate, but ultimately the responsibility for your health and decisions rests with you and your healthcare provider. Okay, so why should we use herbs daily? Now, just to give you a short history of herbs in general, the earliest recorded records that we're told are the Sumerian tablets, which relate to Ayurvedic medicine. Have you heard or heard of Ayurvedic medicine? Okay, so the earliest recorded records on tablets were from the Sumerians. Then we have the Egyptians who used Egyptian healings, and that healing modality is used by the Arabic culture. TCM, traditional Chinese medicine. Now there's something called the classic Yellow Emperor's Materia Medica, which is a detailed record of Chinese medicine and it's an in-depth record of Chinese medicine and how it's to be used and basically in healing. Hippocrates came afterwards with the Greeks. Now he had 400 herbs which he used, but he also mixed them with the historic knowledge from the Chinese medicine. So 400 herbs mixed with traditional Chinese medicine. He only looked at 4 aspects of health. Those were the 4 humors. Now, the 4 humors that they called was bile, green bile, black bile, phlegm, and blood. Those were the 4 humors that they used to identify disease or ill health in an individual. We have the 8 laws of health, which are the 8 doctors. The 2 biles was black bile, green bile. Yes, 4 humors. Phlegm and blood.
Thank you.
Hippocrates was also he coined the phrase, first do no harm. That is the medical profession's doctor's oath that most doctors or many doctors take. First, do no harm. In terms of first, do no harm, we know that the comparison between pharmaceuticals and natural medicine, we know that medication comes with side effects. Some of the most dire side effects of drugs are death. First, do no harm for me doesn't really match with it. But that's not to say that we don't need the medical profession. If we need an emergency or if we are looking after ourselves and it's an instance where we need to get that extra support, then that is something that we should incorporate and we should use. After Hippocrates, we came the Aztecs, which were a native people to the South Americas. Okay, when they were taken over by the Spanish, their religious powers decided that the practices of the Aztecs, they used herbs for their rituals and they used herbs for their healing modalities. They decided that it was to be outlawed and seen as evil. So they didn't allow them to practice it. But what they did is, underground, they still kept their practices working. Now, coming to the UK or to England, there is somebody called Culpeper. And this person, he was very popular back in the 15th and 16th century. And he maintained Hippocrates' modality of using herbs. But he also incorporated the American Indians' herbs of choice for healing modalities. But Culpeper was very close to a famous king, Henry VIII. How many of you knew that Henry VIII was heavily involved in herbalism? No, I only knew Henry VIII was involved because he had a burial of wives. He had many wives. So he was very active in herbalism. And basically he created something called the Herbalist Charter, or the Quackery Charter, as some people called it, in 1542. What that allowed us to do was that protected the women that were practicing herbalism and allowed them to practice herbalism, but protected them from the surgeons and the doctors of the day, who were very expensive and quite invasive in their treatments. So even back then, they had surgeons that would cut, burn, and stitch. But then we also had people that were interested in using God's pharmacy to help them to heal from certain ailments. So herbal history as known. Every culture in the history of this earth have used herbs. Herbalism was recognized by the Egyptians, but they weren't the first people to actually use it. The ancient Greeks or the Romans. We know in the Romans' times, Christ, when he was crucified, Nicodemus came to the disciple to help embalm him, and he had with him 75 pounds of myrrh. That's a lot of myrrh to embalm Christ. But we know that Christ was anointed with oils, herbal, with spikenard, which was a very costly and very effective herb. So we know that he was embalmed with that. Okay, so even there we have the use of herbal medicine. God created herbs in the original state of play for the service of mankind. Okay, so I don't look at all of the others. I look at what is originally the first opportunity for mankind. Genesis 1 verse 11 tells us, and God said, let the earth bring forth grass, the herb yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after his kind, whose seed is in itself upon the earth, and it was so. Psalms tells us, he causeth the grass to grow for the cattle and the herbs for who? The service of man, that he may bring forth food out of the earth. Okay. Now, in terms of natural foods and pharmaceuticals, the American Association for Poison Control, I looked this up, and in 2009, the American Association for Poison Control reported 0 deaths attributed to homeopathic and herbal treatments in their national poison data system. That's their annual report. Zero, none, okay? In contrast, in 2009, the same organization reported over 1,500 fatalities and from pharmaceutical drugs exposure in their national poison data system. Now, these were in the form of analgesic, which are pain relievers. You'll know more about these terminologies later on. Sedatives and cardiovascular drugs were among the most frequent causes of severe poisonings and deaths. This category far surpasses the death related to herbal and homeopathic treatments, underscoring the significant risks associated with misuse, overdose, that's overuse, and adverse reactions to pharmaceuticals. Over a 10-year period from 2009, there are only 3 deaths attributed to herbalism. I was speaking to somebody here earlier on, and I was mentioning to them that sometimes there are herbs which are used by people and they're used in such a negative way that it causes the establishment to want to ban them. One of the herbs that I noted was nutmeg. In America, they had a challenge, a nutmeg challenge, and they would stuff their mouths full as they could with as many nutmegs as they could and see how long they could stay there without it. And as a result of that, they experienced a high degree of hallucinations. Now, the argument was that, oh, nutmeg, it's very dangerous. We should ban that. So that just gives you an idea of the type of mindset that comes from the misuse of something which we use. Do any of you here use nutmeg? How much of nutmeg do you use when you're using it?
For us, so I use sparingly now, and I try to use cardamom instead of it.
Right. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. Sorry, sister?
I've used it since I was young.
But in terms of dose, in terms of amounts, it's just so you wouldn't ever dream of using a whole nutmeg. No. Okay. Just a grater, just a little sprinkle to give it, because it's very aromatic. Certain herbs and certain barks are very aromatic and they have therapeutic value. But when you abuse that therapeutic value, you find yourself in problems, as these young people found. Also, there's another herb, lobelia. Lobelia is called the thinking herb. Why is it called the thinking herb? Because lobelia is said to take and lead different herbs to where they need to go. Now, that's, for me, that is an excellent, marvelous piece of information to know. Sister? Lobelia. You can, lobelia, yes, lobelia inflata. Yeah, you can get different variations. And the good thing about nature is there are loads of herbs which come from the same family that have similar properties, but there is a variety of them. So lobelia, L-O-B-E-L-I-A, L-O-B, lobelia, I-L-A. Okay, so if you use lobelia too much, emetic. And emetic means that it will cause you to vomit. Okay, so basically, the records show that in contrast, the use of herbs in green compared to the use of pharmaceuticals in yellow, there is a vast difference. Popularity in usage. Herbalism has seen a resurgence due to a growing interest in natural and holistic health practices. I've seen a lot of people now leaning towards natural medicine and natural foods closer to the ground, okay? Many people are still seeking alternatives to synthetic drugs, and they're drawn to herbalism for its emphasis on natural healing and fewer side effects. On the point of side effects, isolates. We were speaking earlier on as well about aspirin. Aspirin contains something called salicylate, but we're going to go to that in a moment. Isolates, what are they? Most drugs in Western medicine were plant-derived extracts. The development of synthetic chemicals allowed scientists to systematically vary the structure of the chemical substances in the actual herb. Have you heard of pharmaceutical grade herbs? Yep, pharmaceutical grade herbs are grown, but they're grown in a sterile environment, but they lean towards more of the isolates that they want to show in the actual drug. So an isolate, salicylate or salicylate. Okay. Now there's something called salicylate intolerance. Now, where do you get salicylate intolerance from? The only place that you can really get salicylate intolerance from is from aspirin. If you've used aspirin a lot, then your body builds up a resistance to it and it becomes an issue for you. So that is the only salicylate proven to cause a reaction in people that have an intolerance to it. Now, what's really strange is aspirin has a dosage of 325 milligrams of salicylates, and the extra strength is 600 to 650 milligrams of salicylates within it, which is the active compound. We have foods that contain salicylates. We have fruits, vegetables, and spices which contain the highest amounts. Why are we taking a drug when we can, in actual fact, have a diet which includes the medicines that your father has produced for you? Herbs and spices, highest concentration by weight. Curry powder, 218 milligrams per 100 grams. Now, in comparison, we have raspberries. When I was doing this, I didn't know that raspberries had this, but raspberries have 4.4 milligrams of salicylates per 100 grams. Would you rather eat raspberries or take an aspirin? If you're eating raspberries on a regular basis, and we're eating foods within their season, God has produced certain foods within their season that you can benefit from all of these compounds that he's provided for you. Somebody had the forethought that you would need all of these, so they put them in plants and herbs so that when the time came, they would be available to you. Sis?
I just wanted to clarify whether by saying curry powder, do you mean turmeric powder or curry powder? What's the difference?
Curry powder.
Curry?
So your standard curry powder.
So it's different from turmeric.
Turmeric, curcumin, there are derivatives of them, isn't there? Because from turmeric, you get curcumin and you have curry powder. So curry powder in its purest form is what I'm referring to.
That's why I was asking, because we're told to use turmeric instead.
Because I know
You
that
can't get
curry
curry.
is usually mixed with other seasonings. No, I am trying to ask that question.
Yeah. Well, I will double check that for you afterwards and find out, because from my understanding, curry powder, if it does contain other elements, then I'll find out for you today and get back to you before the end of the afternoon. Okay. And sis, you were saying similar. Okay, that's cool. Thank you both. So low salicylate foods are cereals, meat, fish, and dairy. They contain very little or none at all. So herbs, what are they? Herbs are plants which are valued for their medicinal, therapeutic, and culinary properties. Properties being the key word, because within the foods, the compounds, the oils, the aromas, they all have an effect on your anatomy. While all herbs are plants, not all plants are herbs. The key lies in their medicinal and their nutritional value. Okay, would you all agree with that? The differences between herbs are that herbs are non-woody plants, typically used for their leaves, seeds, roots, or the flowering tops. We call the flowering tops of any herbs aerial. So the aerial parts of the plants are what we actually use. Now, the difference to that is, I'll come to the difference in a moment. There's a chap called Ralph Waldo Emerson, and he said weeds are plants with virtues which are yet to be discovered. I would agree 100% with that, for the simple reason, when you look at the history of herbs, people were using herbs with no problem at all. Okay, then someone came along and said, oh, let's verify that. Let's look into the comp. Oh, yes, that is good for this. Oh, yes, that is good for that. Who showed these people these foods were good for X, Y, and Z? Who showed them that if you had a condition, that these herbs could be used to help that health challenge? It wasn't the FDA, because they weren't around back then. And it wasn't the NHS, because they definitely weren't around back then. All plants have virtue. Every plant is important and has something valuable to offer you. Trees clean the air. Plants give us food. Keeping in mind, pause right there, the sea produces a lot of oxygen because you have green life at the bottom of the tree, algae that produce green life that give off their oxygen. Sometimes you can see blue algae. When you shine a light on the sea, you can see the algae shining blues and their greens in below the sea levels. They are live plants. How many of you have ever put a vegetable in the fridge in a bag and the bag sweats like crazy and then the food rottens? Because you're suffocating, you're stopping your food from breathing. Your food is like, open the bag, let me breathe. And when it doesn't, it builds up the oxygen and then it damages it. And then you get a slime on the carrots and then the mold on some of the vegetables, etc., etc. So other herbs help us to heal when we're sick. Every plant we think might be useless, like weeds, help nature by supporting animals and insects. By understanding how plants help the world, we can take better care of them, our planet, and ourselves. Matthew 6:28-30. Why do you worry about clothes? See how the flowers of the field grow. They do not labor or spin, yet I tell you that not even Solomon in all of his splendor was dressed like one of these. If that's how God clothed the grass of the fields, which is here today and tomorrow, is thrown into the fire, will he not much more clothe you, you of little faith? Botanicals. What are botanicals? Botanicals are herbs, a botanical is a small seed-bearing plant that doesn't have a woody stem and dies back to the ground, and at the end of the growing season, it lays dormant, and then in the spring, it comes back up again. This definition excludes plants like rosemary, thyme, and lavender. These are herbs, but they have woody stems. Okay, so they're not green and easy to break. They're very strong. Botany. Plant botany is the study of all aspects of plants and photosynthesizing organisms. So plants get their life and energy from the sun. In actual fact, we all know about the 8 laws of health, right? I would say, and I was saying to someone earlier on, plants actually follow the 8 laws of health better than most of us. Before you disagree with me, let me share. Nutrition. Plants don't go to an all-you-can-eat buffet between 9 and 5 and stuff themselves or overfill themselves. They take what they need, they break down the metals in the soil, and they produce iron for you, they produce copper for you, they produce all of the foods that you need to sustain life. Nutrition. Exercise. When plants grow, they're looking for light, and they're always turning towards wherever the sun goes. Some plants open during the day and they close at night. Plants have intelligence. Do not take it for granted that it's a plant. God has put it there for us to use, but that plant also has intelligence, okay? Because as I said with lobelia, it is the driving herb for many other herbs. How does milk thistle know to go to certain areas of the liver and work in the liver and everywhere else? No, don't need you. Liver, done. So there is some science to that to prove that. So exercise and water. God allows the rain to fall on the earth and to nourish the soil so that the plants can actually get grass or get fluids to continue to grow. Sunlight, just explain the sunlight, exercise, water, sunlight. Trust in the divine. Now, at the end of the day, plants and life on earth is part of God's creation. So they have a natural trust that the sun is going to shine and the sun is going to nourish them and give them what they need. Air. If you take away air from plants or you put them in a vacuum, they will create their own eco and they will produce their own oxygen. Okay. Rest. We know that plants rest at night, but then they also produce oxygen for us and they take in carbon dioxide. So they clean the air and they give you oxygen. Temperance. So temperance is the only one that I have a kind of a, but temperance is all things in moderation. So if too much sun, the plant withers. If there's just enough sun, it thrives. Some plants like a shady area, and if you take a plant that needs sun and you place them in a shady area, he can't thrive. So new start for me, plant lives observe it better than we do. As technical techniques improve over the centuries, so does the actual depth and knowledge in the qualities of plants. Last year they said, oh, this plant contains this, 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 and this. But then when they researched it even more and they looked into the chemical properties of the plants, they realized that the plants actually have more properties in them that they didn't see before. So technical advances allow even more in-depth examinations. Just as our ancestors did, they used their senses to identify and work with plants and teach each other. So we can learn to identify plants using our senses of sight. We can view the plants, we can view the herbs, we can smell. We all know that you can touch a basil, you can touch rosemary, and you can smell it. And even taste. Some of us don't like taste, certain tastes, but we're going to cover that. Plant potency. What do I mean by plant potency? All plants have varying degrees of potency. They have character, they have strengths, even when they share similar properties. Environmentally conditioned. Most plants will grow in different environments, but those environments will condition them to actually produce more potent compounds that they have. Some plants grow up in the highest parts of Mount Everest, and they are filled with compounds which are very useful to us. Plants have medicine for their own self-defense, but then we also use them for our own defense and our own health. So plants need protection from bugs, from virals, from bacteria, from fungus, and other elements that might want to eat them or that might want to do away with them. Monoculture. Do we know what monoculture is? Monoculture is the growth of a single food to use in a system. Nature doesn't have a monoculture, okay? The Irish back in, I think it was in the 16 or 1700s, they had the potato blight. I can't remember when it was exactly, forgive me. But what happened was that lasted something like from 1845 to 1842 to 1854 or something like that. And the whole country was a very bad starvation. Why? Because out of all of the choices on variations of potatoes, they said, we like this one. And we're going to grow this one everywhere. But then there was a bacteria or a virus, or sorry, a fungus that came and it saw all of these potato fields, and the virus or the bacteria was like, this is good for me. And it took over the whole, it caused a blight. So there was a famine of potatoes. So monoculture does not exist in God's pharmacy. The character of a plant is honorable. Why do I say that? Because they retain all of their nutritional properties and the medicinal values. Seeds contain a life force and properties needed for us for healing and for cleansing. Even when they're dried, sometimes they provide even more. Respect and safety. All plants possess medicinal values. Even poisonous plants. The Venus flytrap. Do you know of the plant called Japanese knotweed? Yep, Does anyone else know Japanese knotweed? If you find Japanese knotweed on your property, the value of your house, no value. Because knotweed goes deep and wide, and it tears up the soil and it grows up on your building and it binds up on everything and damages everything. So when people have Japanese knotweed in their house or on their land, they either try to hide it or they try everything to dig up everything and remove all of the soil and then replace it with something else, okay? But Japanese knotweed is a very good, it has very good and very potent compounds which are good for cancer. As growing up, we're taught that if someone says to you weedy, that means that you're weak and have no significance. But also, we're told to use weed killers to get rid of all of the weeds. And if you have weeds in your garden, dig up the weeds because they're no good. But weeds serve a purpose in your gardens because they tell you the actual quality and the state of your soil. So those of you that grow, you will know that if you see dandelion, or if you see a lobelia, or if you see nettles, it tells you about the condition of your soil. If you are knowledgeable to nature, nature speaks to you just the same way that your body speaks to you. But because you don't speak nature, you don't see that actual, those actual benefits. Poke root, the berries, if eaten, can be very problematic. But poke root, used medicinally, is an excellent user for liver and cancer issues. It's important to know that herbs, it's important to know the herbs that you're using in respect of and respect the ones that you don't know. Okay. So know your sources, store away from direct light when you're storing them, and use glass containers where possible. Death in the pot. Can somebody find 2 Kings 4, verse 39 and 40 for me, please? I noted verse 39, but I didn't note verse 40. And if someone can read that for me. 2 Kings 4, verse 39 and 40.
And found a wild vine, and gathered thereof the board with lack form, and came and showed them into the pot of pottage, for they knew them not. For they poured out for the men to eat. And it came to pass, as they were eating of the pottage, that they cried out and said, O thou man of God, there is death in the pot, and they could not eat thereof.
Death in the pot. So whoever went out to collect the bitter gourds, they didn't know which gourds they were picking. They shredded them and put them into the prophet's pot to cook. And then when they fed it to somebody, to other brethren, they realized this is not good, it's poison. But what the prophet did is he came and he took some flour and he put the flour into the pot. Okay. Now it's not necessarily the flour that removed the poison, because we know that all things through God work for good of those that trust in him. He put the flour in the pot, and I would assume through chemical processes that the flour absorbed all of the poisons and made it less bitter, or made it less of an issue to consume. And they continued to eat the pot, the pottage. Okay. Okay, so what I do is herbalism. So herbalism is the practice of using plants for medicinal purposes. And it's a healing art based on the therapeutic properties of the plant and natural substances. Unlike conventional medicine, which often focuses on treating specific symptoms, herbalism seeks to support the body's natural healing process. Herbalism is more than using plants medicinally. It also includes understanding plant properties, their effects on the body, and having a holistic approach to health and well-being. I think that in terms of using the phrase "first do no harm," I think that it's more naturopaths and herbalists and people that actually practice that, because we use herbs in their smallest dosage and then we build up to a more potent dose. And then basically we aim to treat the whole person from the root rather than the symptom. Okay. So herbalists focus on treating the person as a whole rather than just targeting symptoms, integrating physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. We don't practice without praying over the herb, praying over the person, and asking God to do what he's promised to do with the herbs. Doctrine of signatures. So the doctrine of signatures indicate that certain foods look like certain parts of the human anatomy. The belief is that the physical characteristics of the plants, the shape, the color, the texture, potentially indicate their potential medicinal use. Eyes very much support the carrot. Now, people have always assumed this before the 1940s when drugs first came into play, or before the World Wars, okay? So we now know that vitamin A is contained in carrots, which is very good for the eyes. Avocado for the uterus. Avocados take 9 months to actually produce, but they also have fats and oils which are useful to the pregnant mother during her pregnancy. Tomatoes looks like the chambers of the heart. So again, when you cook tomatoes, do they not produce even more chemicals which are beneficial to us? Yes. The walnut, I need lots of walnuts because my brain seems to be shrinking. But according to doctrine of signatures, the walnut also is good for the brain based on the look. When you look at it scientifically, there are fats in the walnuts which actually help to stimulate and help the brain to produce cholesterol and fats that is needed, because your brain is fatty tissue and water, 75% water for the brain alone. When you're dehydrated, where do I live again? Where's my keys? What's your name? Dehydration drains the brain's power and allows you to have these forgetful states of being. Grapes. I know for a fact that black grapes, the skin of black grapes contain the compounds that I need to help somebody with cancer to overcome cancer. Okay. It looks like lungs as well. It supports the lungs, but we know that it contains something called resveratrol, which is a compound which is used for cancer patients. Okay, I had somebody that was on a juice, black grapes, not white grapes, black Concord grapes, pure organic apple juice, carrot juice, organic carrot juice, and distilled water. And they were on that juice for a few weeks or for a number of weeks, say up to about 11 weeks. And their PSA was 2,200. If you know how they mark the PSA, your PSA should be between 3 and 5, normal. Above that is problematic. Higher than that, then they need to take a biopsy. Higher than that, then you have metastasis. So I saw for myself how that process and that protocol, using the grapes, using the juices, and sticking to the 8 laws of health, actually brought this person back to health from a PSA of 2002 to reduced down to 190. But the thing about with people is, us as humans, is we get better only to go back to what it was that actually made us sick, and then unhealth comes into play. The doctrine of signatures is how ancient herbalists and healers use that doctrine. That idea dates back to the Greeks and the Romans, so they documented it and made it something that we could relate to now. So we looked at the walnut, we looked at liverwort. It's a leaf-shaped plant, and its actual leaves are used to support the liver. Red clover. What do we use red clover for? Does anybody know? Blood cleanse. So you see those ripples in the red clover. Where can you find red clover? Do you have to travel thousands of miles to get red clover?
Yeah.
You go into your yard and you look around sometimes, and when the soil is of a certain condition, you have lots. Sis?
White one as well. My garden.
Okay, right. They come up. Right, so they rest a year, they pop up a year, dry them. Does everybody have a dehydrator, or does anybody own a dehydrator? No. Dehydrator allows you to pick plants and dry them at a steady rate that they maintain their nutritional or their healing properties. So you can, it comes with instructions and you can set the dial and it can help you to do that. If you leave the plants, my aunt lives in North London, and outside her front door, she has a ginkgo plant, a ginkgo tree. And the ginkgo tree has been there for years. And one day I went there, and all the years that I've been going to her house, I didn't notice it. And then one day I said, Auntie, you have a ginkgo tree outside your house. Where? I said, outside your front door. Open up her front door. Oh, I said, don't you ever use it? I didn't even know it was there. Sometimes we're in a concrete jungle and we're surrounded by food, we're surrounded by medicine, we're surrounded by health, and we don't see. Okay. And ginkgo, we know ginkgo, sis?
The white clover, does it do the same job like the?
I believe it does. I always look for the one which has the red in it because that identifies for me that it has certain chemicals, because there's a saying that the darker the darker the color is the more properties, like maca. You've got black, you've got brown, you've got red, and you've got yellow. But the most potent of them is the actual brown or the red. The yellow still has some properties, but not as much as the brown. And I would say the same rules would apply for the red clover. The same with white grapes and red grapes. If you've got something that tastes really bad in your mouth, take a white grape, put it on your tongue, and it cleans the palate. Not so much with the red grape. Okay. Sis?
Can you use the leaves for leaves for the vegetable?
The leaves from the red clover. Yeah, you can use the clover tops, you can use the red clover leaves, and you can dry them as well, but more the actual the heads, the aerials. So you can.
I do find a difference between the red one and the white one. The strength in the red one is stronger than the white one.
Yeah, definitely. Keeping in mind that sometimes you have plants that have the rhizome or the roots, and you will use the roots, but you won't use the leaves. And you might use the aerial parts like the flowering heads, but you won't touch the leaves or the roots. So there are parts of the plants, knowing which parts to use for effectiveness. Ginseng.
Yeah, because I read one of the book for old one where they were using the leaves for after winter time.
Yes.
So they kept it as a vegetable.
Okay, that's another one. Moringa, you can use the drumstick. You can bust the drumstick open. You can take the seeds. You can eat the seeds. They are bitter as. But if you take a glass of water, it's so sweet. Too sweet. So you go from one extreme to the other extremes. Another thing I say about herbs are like people. Herbs have character. They have taste. Some people, they're like, it's too sharp for me. It's too soft for me. Oh, the herbs are exactly the same. Yeah, you have herbs that are very strong and very potent, and you have people that are very strong and very potent. I fall in the softly section of the herbs. I don't know where you find yourselves, but when we go through the herbs, you'll be able to see which one matches you. So, how do you spell ginkgo? G-I-N-K-O. Ginkgo biloba. Ginkgo. Oh, ginkgo. Go. G-I-N-G.
TKO.
J-O.
No J.
G-O.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Okay. So avocado, we spoke about that. Okay. And basically what I've put there is move away apples. It turns out that avocado a day may keep cramps away. So for women cramping, avocados, it contains magnesium, omega-3 acids, fatty acids, and it's been shown to inhibit the release of prostaglandin, the hormone-like substance responsible for uterine contractions. Okay. Bananas and serotonin. This is my favorite one. Serotonin looks like a crooked smile. That's in the shape of the banana. Okay. And that's where the smiley shaped banana comes into play. It's a natural boost of the happy chemicals. It lifts your spirits and brings a smile to your face. The wildly loved fruit contains tryptophan, a protein that converts into serotonin. Serotonin is very important. We're going to look at serotonin in one moment. It increases the production of serotonin in the body, though it does not cross the blood-brain barrier. Okay. Serotonin. I'm going to use this as a metaphor. You're in love with your wife. Your dopamine levels are high. Your serotonin levels are high. And your oxytocin levels are high. You're not sure whether your wife is happy with you today and you're anxious. Or you're not sure whether your partner is happy with you and you're anxious. Your dopamine levels are quite high, anxiety. Your serotonin levels drop by half. And your oxytocin levels bottom out. They're almost non-existent. That is a clear indication of how the body is when you are anxious. Depression, we now know that she is vexed with you and she has been vexed with you for a long while, or vice versa. Depression is when all of them, all three, dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin are very low. Now, if that is the case, we can't use chemicals, synthetic serotonin, to boost the body back up to a happy state. They say that when people are depressed, that they give them a synthetic serotonin. But the difference between the synthetic serotonin and the food serotonin is that the synthetic serotonin, when it goes through the nerve ending and it crosses the synaptic joint, there is no reuptake. So there's no exchange between the going and the coming back, okay, up the actual synaptic joint. But with the food based serotonin, it goes through the synaptic gap into the nerve receptor. And once that level of happiness is reached, it goes back up the synaptic gap. So there's a balance. So each can balance itself. The body can be balanced itself, but the synthetic one doesn't allow for the reuptake. So you can end up with something called serotonin syndrome, which when they give you a drug for serotonin syndrome, because there's no reverse of it, it builds up in your system and it can become fatal, or it is fatal. So you have to come off of the synthetic or the drug serotonin. I'll
Sertraline as in a depressant tablet.
Yeah, I'm not sure of the actual names of them of all of the drugs, because the drug names change every year, and sometimes the same drugs that has the name will have 4 or 5 different other names, and you will be taking it and not knowing exactly what. So there is somebody sitting down there making up names for different drugs. So I'd have to say that I don't know all of the names of the drugs that contain it. And happiness. When you're happy, dopamine levels are low and oxytocin is low, but serotonin is high. That is a natural state to be, okay? Happiness doesn't need dopamine and it doesn't need oxytocin to drive it. It's a natural state. So serotonin is the mainstay. So tryptophan converts to serotonin. The synthetic version is not very helpful because it doesn't allow the body to regulate itself. Too much serotonin of the synthetic kind gives you the serotonin syndrome. So the best thing to do is to discontinue the drugs. If not, it can become fatal. I put a sideline there for vitamin B12 because I wanted to mention that later on, but as it's there now, I'm going to ask you. Many people say that there's a problem with vegans and vegetarians obtaining their vitamin B12. Yeah, many people agree with that, and some people disagree. I kind of disagree because there are green foods that you can have which contain levels of B12. Spirulina contains small amounts of it. Oh gosh, what's the one begins with C? Spirulina. No, it's like chlorophyll, coriander. Oh, my mind's gone blank on it. Chlorella. Chlorella is that. Thank you so much, God. Thank you so. Chlorella is the highest form of vitamin B12. Okay. Also, your body B12 is a It's a bacteria that the body uses in very small doses. Okay, these are the foods that contain essential amino acids. Okay, so essential amino acids. Does anybody have any questions or any queries?
How do we spell
Chlorophyll. Sorry, chlorella. CHLORELLA. Sir. Yeah. Okay. Essential amino acids: histidine, valine, tryptophan, threonine, phenylalanine, methionine, lysine, lysoline, BCCA, and leucine. These are your essential amino acids. Your body doesn't make them, so you have to get them from your foods. These are the key foods to incorporate into your diet, which is going to help you to maintain that. Okay. Broccoli and cancer. We're still under the doctrine of signatures. So basically, we look at the magnifying view of the miniature green buds on the broccoli. They look like a cluster of cancerous cells. So in fact, broccoli comes from the cruciferous family, and they decrease prostate cancer and the formation of prostate cancer. Okay, they decrease the severity of it. Furthermore, certain components isolated from broccoli may aid in the prevention and the delaying the advancement of bladder cancer. So if you're eating your cruciferous vegetables on a regular basis, there will be less chance of you developing any of these diseases. Okay, so I'm going to skip through a few of these. I'm going to go through to a couple of points here, because I can cover these in a further session. Celery stalks look like bones. Grapefruit for the breast and lymphatic system. Okay. They contain limonoids. Grapes we looked at for the lungs. Okay. They contain amygdalin and B17. Brother.
Sorry, let's bring it back a bit. On the broccoli, I think somebody came to check if they were still maybe cut it and maybe leave a bit.
Let it sit sometimes. I know that's true. I know that's true for garlic. When we're using garlic, we break it, crush it, and we leave it for a few minutes so that something called allicin can develop. And once that, after about 5 minutes, once you know that the allicin is there, then you take it and you put it in the mix. Broccoli, I mean, there's no harm in cutting your vegetables and leaving them for a few minutes. And then, because to tell you the truth, when you cut them, it's a few minutes before you put them into the pot type thing, unless you're going to cut them and put them straight in. But I don't know that. I'd have to look into that as well. But we cook our vegetables until they're still crunchy, but the cell walls is broken down enough for you to now consume it and then be able to get the properties out of the cell wall. Okay, but broccoli and cancer cells are very good. Celery stalks and bones. Bones composed of 23% sodium, among other minerals. So sodium, manganese, magnesium, calcium, and phosphorus. In terms of bone disease, we know that these are helpful in developing good, strong bones. Exercise as well, walking. If you're deficient, your body will extract it from your bones, causing weakness. So if you are deficient in calcium, magnesium, your body takes it from your bones. Okay, that's not a good thing though, because it's called when your bones, the pores on your bones open up and the cells break away, and the cells do not repair themselves, then the bone becomes spongy. I used the example of back in the day we used to eat chicken, and when you bite into the chicken bone is biting you back because it's clink, 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 clink. Nowadays, you bite into a chicken, and the chicken, before you even bite the chicken bone, the chicken bone is broken because it's demineralized. Demineralized means it's deficient in its minerals. Two of the main things that cause disease across the whole board is deficiency and toxicity. Okay, if you're deficient, your body's open to toxicity. There's no protection. If you're toxic, then deficiency is already in play, and then you're toxic. You have to get rid of that toxicity in order for the body to be able to function properly. Grapefruit and the bread and the breast for women. Grapefruit has also been used for Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease. So when we're eating those things on a regular basis, again, it's good. A diet rich in black grapes and black grape seeds, they contain something called amygdalin. For a while, amygdalin, B17, was sought after for cancer treatments. I don't know if it still is, but it seems to have gone quiet on that front. But the skin of the actual grapes is really good, and the seeds are very potent. They contain the amygdalin, which also they contain 2 molecules of glucose and 1 molecule of cyanide. According to science and what I understand from science, the only thing that can actually open up that cell to extract the glucose and the amygdalin is a cancer cell. So when the cancer cell opens up that cell compounds to extract the sugar, it releases the cyanide, which breaks it down and kills it. You also get cyanide from apple seeds. When I was growing up, we were always told, eat your apple, eat the seed, eat everything. The only thing you're not going to eat is the core. Yep.
So don't bias.
Papaya, I eat papaya seeds by the tablespoon. What do they have? They have parasite, they're anti-parasitical, and they're anti-inflammatory. I'm not sure all of the chemicals. Well, they might contain seeds. Seeds need to protect themselves in nature. So many seeds do have chemicals in them. But when you eat an apple, for example, and you eat the apple seed, the cyanide in the apple is not going to affect you because the flesh from the apple neutralizes it. Yeah, but don't worry about that. God will not provide foods for you to eat that are going to cause you any issues. Okay, when we're eating and we're practicing temperance, then these things shouldn't be an issue. Kidney bean speaks for itself. Mushrooms in the air. Okay, mushrooms are high in vitamin D, and also they promote strong bones for the delicate ears, the bones in the ears. Olives and the ovaries. This one was kind of new to me, but olives have properties which support the ovaries. Okay, so although the exact mechanism is still unknown, again, that's science looking into why are olives good for the ovaries. Science is looking into that, but sometimes science always come back and say has not been proven or hasn't been verified. So sometimes for some people they'll be like, oh, it can't be any good then. There's no science to back it. But nature provides everything that you need. So you trust what has been given to you until science confirms it. Onion and the cells. So onions make you cry, but they should be tears of joy. Visually, onions look like the cells found in your body. According to the National Institute for Health, onions have the ability to eliminate waste materials from every cell in the body. Sometimes you take onions and people put onions underneath their bed, draws out. They put it in their fridge, draws out. So this is why they say when you're using onions, you don't use it and then put it in the fridge or leave it out because it pulls things from the atmosphere into it. And you can see sometimes it shrivels up and then it has like a kind of a rough edge to it. Not only because it's drying out, but because it's pulling in so many impurities outside of it. Okay, so these look like the epithelial layers of your eyes. Okay, so under a microscope. Sweet potatoes and pancreas, who knew about that one? Yep, thank you. So the oblong shape of the sweet potato, and most people should favor the sweet potato over the regular potato. When you're eating your potatoes, the power lies in the skin. So if you're going to eat regular potatoes, have the chunky, cut them thick, and make sure you keep the skin. Don't peel your potatoes and then put the white into the pot because the white, not so much. The skin, very much. So use kids, young people, if you're going to be using, if you want chips, chunky chips with the skin. The wedges, that's the one. Walnuts in the brain, we covered. Mnemonics, nature's mnemonics. Nature's mnemonics is what we've just discussed. It's basically the resource associated with the doctrine of signatures, which individuals recognize the therapeutic value of plants based on their morphological. Morphological just means how they look, their morphological characteristics. Okay, so what time am I on? How long have I got?
You got 9 minutes to 11.
9 minutes to 11. Okay, so I'm going to go through some terminology. Sure. the benefits of the sweet potatoes, sorry. Sorry, so we call it an identical doppelganger for the pancreas because of the way that it looks when boiled. It aids in regulating the glycemic index for diabetics. So if you have diabetes, sweet potato is one of the best low glycemic index foods that you need. Anybody that is diabetic or you're supporting somebody, go onto Google and just ask Google to look for low glycemic indexed foods for vegans stroke vegetarians. And then it will give you that. I do have a list, I should have a list on here of the foods, etc. But you can get them online. And if you want to, I can pass them on to Brother Desire to help or to support you. It also contains beta carotene, which is a powerful antioxidant. Now, the reason why we eat a lot of these foods, a lot of the fruits, a lot of the berries, raspberries, strawberries, almond berries, goji berries. If you know the name of a berry, make sure that you can get hold of it. Doesn't matter if it's dried, get yourself some distilled water, put the berries in the water, reconstitute them, and have them in your fruit salad. Okay. There's white mulberries and different variations of them. There's gooseberries, and there's what's the ones that we have in the little paper, the Chinese lanterns? Physalis. Yeah, physalis. They're beautiful little golden berries. You go to a very cuisine type restaurant and they would charge you the earth just to put a few of them on your dessert. They cut them, they take the paper, they put the paper on the side, and they put the berries on there. They give you a slice of chocolate with it, and then they charge you £100. But those berries are very helpful for you because they contain chemicals and they contain compounds that your body needs for antioxidants. Okay, they contain all of those chemicals that your body needs. I mean, there are hundreds not hundreds, there are thousands, over 5,000 different chemicals in fruits and berries. We don't need to know, it's good to know some of them. You don't need to know all of them, but what you do need to know is that 1, it's organic, 2, that it's helpful for a condition, and 3, that you can get hold of it, okay? So basically, it says here that it's good for the pancreas. It's also protects against cancer and aging, which is something that very useful. I mean, against aging, everybody wants to slow down that process, and just the consumption of water and these berries will actually slow the deterioration process down. Okay. Any other queries on that? Okay, so do we understand mnemonics, which is the morphological characteristics of a food that looks like the body? So when someone says to you nature's mnemonics, yes, okay. So if it's the case where somebody mentions any of these phrases to you, mnemonics, nature's mnemonics, you now know what it means, okay? Okay, so 1940s, they saw a significant development in the pharmaceuticals industries. Antibiotics. Before the 1940s, what were we using for healing? Herbs, tinctures, and things like that. And oils. Exactly. Essential oils are very powerful and they should be used with caution. Okay. But before the war, they use use herbs. Round about the World War period, antibiotics, penicillin came into play. Okay, and that revolutionized the infection treatment and saved countless lives, both in the military and in the civil populations. Now, the thing about it is that amphetamines came into play, psychiatric medications. Okay, now straight away, the minute I mentioned amphetamines and psychiatrics, alarm bells should be triggering in you. Anything that goes into the body that changes your way of thinking, changes your way that your body functions, it's not a good thing. Okay, things should work in tune with your body. Your body should be the guiding factor. So healing shouldn't be rushed or forced. If someone has a fever, you don't force that fever because forcing that fever will bring on death. Okay, you work with the body's ability. Pain management, morphine. Morphine was used for pain relief. When they found out how morphine is very addictive because it's an isolate, which we spoke about. An isolate is taking something from a whole thing, throwing away the whole thing and using the isolate in high doses and giving it to somebody, and then their body becomes addicted to it. But morphine was commonly used for pain, okay, for relief for injured soldiers, and its medicinal use expanded, highlighting the need for controlled opiates post-war. Sulfur drugs, that's another group of early antibiotics. They were essentially treating bacterial infections. Now, the thing about it is, in the war, they used to use colloidal silver and ozone in the world wars. The colloidal silver was used to stave off infections. So soldiers would get dry rot in their feet, and they would use the colloidal silver. They would also use ozone to actually help to get rid of bacteria or viruses and fungal infections. Okay, so sulfur drugs were used as early antibiotics. That was before penicillin was widely available. So after the World War II, pharmaceutical industry grew really rapidly, and it led to the introduction of new drugs, vaccines, and treatments. In China, these opiates were brought to China and was introduced to them by the Dutch and the English. They brought those drugs into those countries, and it made a lucrative profit. Why did it make a lucrative profit for the Dutch and the English? Because people were taking it more, they were taking more, and they were becoming addicted to it. In order to get the English and the Dutch out of China and to take away the morphine, they made trade deals with the West to try and appease them to get rid of it. But what happened was it became more of an issue, and they didn't want to release this lucrative trade. And it was only until 1997 that the end of that trade, that the English only released Hong Kong back to China as a result of that trade that they had with the drugs. So the worst thing about the morphine, or the bad thing about the morphine, is because a derivative of morphine, which was heroin, came into play afterwards. Heroin was much worse than morphine, okay? And it became much more commercialized. So SMH, shake my head, sad. So Ministry of Health, Chapter 8, the true physician is an educator. He or she realizes or recognizes the responsibility not only to the sick who are under his direct care, but also to the community in which they live. They stand as a guardian of both physical and moral health. It is his endeavor not only to teach right methods for the treatment of the sick, but to encourage right habits of living and to spread a knowledge of right principles. So when I was shown by my brother over here about the first introduction of the, sorry, I put a time on my thing. When I was reminded about the first vision that Ellen G. White had, which was the great reform of the health reform, I wanted to incorporate that. So once we know better, we should do better. Once we know something works, we shouldn't disregard it. Prevention is better than cure. Okay. What I'm going to do is, when I do our workshop, I'm going to go into the terminology that we use for, as a matter of fact, I've got about 10 minutes. 10 minutes? Okay. I'm going to go through the different terminologies for different types of herbs that we use, or how we use different herbs. Infusions. Infusions are similar to teas, and it involves steeping the herb in hot water, usually the delicate parts like the leaves and the flowers. Now, when we are using those light herbs, we're supposed to use them at the beginning of the day, okay? Because they help the body to acclimatize throughout the day, okay? Now, distilled water. I know many people have a problem with distilled water. I'm going to cover distilled water, so do remind me. I'm not going to cover it now, but I'm going to cover distilled water. So those of you that have been quite helpful in questions and stuff, distilled water. So I'm relying on you to remind me. So I'm not going to try to remember it. You're going to remind me. Distilled water when we're steeping our herbs. Decoctions. Now, when we come to harder, more tougher parts of of roots and barks and stuff like that, we make a decoction, and the decoction is putting them in hot water and boiling them or simmering them over a period of time. So that allows the water distilled to extract the active compounds by boiling the tougher parts. Tinctures. Now, tinctures are a very potent and a very excellent way to extract all of the properties, most of the properties from herbal elements. Okay, so we call that a menstruum. So distilled water is a solvent, but we call it a menstruum. So a menstruum is anything that you add to herbs to actually aid in the extraction of the actual properties that you need. So a herbal extract, a herbal tincture is made by soaking the herbs in alcohol to draw out the plant's active ingredients. And you can also extract them using glycerin, which is an alcohol-free base. And there's no blood sugar issues with that. Now, there is a guy by the name of, oh gosh, it's gone from me now. But he's the only chap that has worked out how to use glycerin extract through different heat elements to extract every single element out of the plant using glycerin. So it's not widely used in pharmaceuticals, etc. But this chap, who's a normal chap like yourself and myself, he's worked out how to do that. So glycerin is a very useful way to get bitter compounds and active ingredients out of our herbs. Sis?
I've been listening to men on this, and he says that you can also do
DMSO.
Yeah.
I was going to cover that later on.
Oh,
Yeah, but that's fine. Yeah, but do continue. Yeah, so DMSO is a solvent, and let's say it's a solvent. It's used as a solvent, very powerful. And what we do is when we're doing poultices, or we're doing you call it fermentations or whatever, or we're doing some sort of external support, put a splash of DMSO in there. It is regulated. We do use specific amounts depending on the parts per ounce of herbs that we use. And what DMSO does, it's a bit like lobelia. It drives, it pulls whatever it is that you're using it with. It draws that into the tissue. So if your hands are dirty, they're greasy, or they've been using other chemicals and you're using DMSO, can be problematic, especially if what you're handling is detrimental to cell life and cell proliferation. So you want to use clean hands when you're using DMSO. I will go through a step-by-step guide for DMSO. Again, that's another one you're going to remember: distilled water and DMSO, the 2 Ds. Okay, essential oils. Concentrated aromatic compounds extracted from these plants are used for aromatherapy. So you have coughs, you have colds, breathing in lavender, breathing in cajeput, which is another, you call it herb oil for respiratory and brain function. That's called CAJPUT, cajeput oil, eucalyptus oil, and lemon balm. These oils are very good for use in colds, flus, etc., etc. But essential oils are very potent oils and should be used with a carrier oil. Poultices, again, DMSO with poultices. A poultice is a moist mixture of herbs applied externally to the skin for therapeutic processes. So you have arthritis, or you have issues with the back or the spine, you can put a poultice on there, splash of DMSO, and the poultice will allow those herbs to be drawn into the central nervous system through the spine, okay? And then it will spread out to the rest of the body. Fermentations. So that's a category of treatment which we use strips of cloths steeped in your infusion or in your teas. And then we wrap the body in the actual fermentation. So say, for example, what is around my hand was a bandage. That would be I could use that as a fermentation. This would be moist, and that area of my hand would be absorbed by the herbal properties, and it would bring healing and relief to my hands. Administration of herbs, different types of administration. When someone says to you oral, that's taken by mouth, okay? ensure that the person is hydrated, okay, well hydrated. Transdermal. Transdermal just simply means applied to the skin topically. Mucosal administration, sinus flush. Has anybody used a neti pot before? Yeah, and does everybody know what a neti pot is? Okay, so a neti pot looks like a little teapot, but it's very small. You fill it with salt water or a saline solution, and you put it to the nose, you know? Thank you very much. Do you want to explain to people how you use it?
When I feel that there is a cold coming on something, I can feel it in my throat, I can feel it in my nose. I get a little plastic bottle, put some warm water in it,
Warm water.
and maybe a little bit of salt,
Yes.
and then I put it in my nose, and then
Tilt
I
your head
just
back.
blow it out.
And then do you let it come out back through the nose or through the mouth?
Just clears up a few.
Yes.
a few of that and clears it.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Um,
Oh, okay. Will it reach down there? Oh, could you come and just quickly explain for the people online? Sorry, sis. What's your name, sister?
Dion.
Dion. Sorry, Dion. Thank you very much, Dion.
It's not a personal testimony, but I've actually done this for myself. So what I have done, some warm water, got a bit skin temp, temperature's got to be right.
Yes,
I
definitely.
put a bit of salt when a cough or a cold is coming up. This is what I do for myself, and I also do it for my children, my grandchildren. So I put a little bit of salt, tiny little bit of salt in a little kind of a plastic little jar, yeah. And then what I do, I shake it up, and then I put both of it in my nostril, one or the other, and I allow it to just come, and then I blow out, and I do it a few times, and by the evening, I'm telling you,
Yeah.
I'm right as rain.
Thank you
Yeah,
very
I hope
much.
that's explained.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question? What kind of salt? We got Celtic salt, we got a pink salt, which one?
The pink salt I use, I don't use the white salt, the pink salt, the Himalaya salt.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just a tip of it, not too much of it.
Yeah.
Just
You can make a salt solution though, can't you? So
Yes.
you make sure that the salt water, the water is dissolved, the salt is dissolved in the water, and you
That's right.
keep on adding the salt
Yeah.
until the salt is dissolved.
Yes.
When you see little grains of salt left in the bottom, then you know that your water is salt saturated. Sister? He was gonna ask.
The one that I
Yeah, that's okay. If you come to the front, thank you. Oh.
Oh, I wanted to ask a question, like in terms of the solution that you're talking about, because I've used it on my son, but it's the one that you buy in the shop. As the thing, and you spray it up the nose, and it does help clear them. I don't know if it's the same thing, but it does help clear the.
It's a saline solution.
Yeah,
Yeah, but
yeah.
I'm not sure what there is in it. But when you're working from home, you know that when you are making it, you know exactly what is in it. So when you get the distilled water and you take a tablespoon of Himalayan or Celtic or what do you call it? The black salt or whatever salt it is, the saltful ones, you add that salt into it, it breaks down. You add more salt into it, it breaks down. All that you have in there is water and salt. So when your saline solution is saturated and you use it, you know exactly that you're using quality stuff. It's like when I make my herbal capsules, I don't put fillers and binders in them. I just use the actual elements, because when you use when you buy them from the shop, they have anti-caking agents, they have fillers and binders, and then they have some other elements, and then you have, sorry, and then you have the actual herb that you want to use. Okay, so directly speaking, when you're making your own herbs, you take your peppermint, you dry it, you put it in, you add it. The same way with the salt solution, you know exactly what's in your capsules. I will be showing you how to make your own capsules. I have a capsule machine here. We're gonna make a mucus buster. So that might be useful for a couple of you here or whatever. But a mucus buster, okay, so that will be able to be used. So if any of you are scared of cayenne pepper, good night. All right. So mucosal admin, administration is sinus flush or a douche. So you'll use a douche. Most women know how to use a douche. If you don't, speak to one of the older sisters and they will advise you accordingly. Inhalation, that is essential oils. So if you have an essential oil, you can breathe it in, or you can take a tissue, add the essential oil to the tissue and fold the tissue over into a square, add the essential oils. Normally when you're using herbs and you're using oils, don't use more than 2 or 3. So if you're going to use the essential oils, you put 2 drops of peppermint, 1 drop cajeput, 1 drop or 2 drops of lavender, and then you roll that little tissue up into a little, like a little stubby, I don't want to, like a little pencil. Like a little pencil. And then what you're going to do is you're going to put that to your nose, cover one nose, breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth. In through your nose and out through your mouth, not in and out. And then you're going to do the other nasal, and you're going to do that 10 times. And then you're going to lie down and relax so that on a pillow underneath the back of your neck to open up the cavity, to open up your neck and to release the tension. And then basically you'll see a change in the actual blockages. All right. So inhalation of essential oils. That's something that we're going to do later on. So this is intramuscular. So this is very rare. But this is where the chemical or the drug or the properties are put into the actual muscle. IV, which is, what you call it, done through a phlebotomist, it's into the vein and intravenous, yeah, and into the bloodstream. But astragalus is something that we use as a topical. I don't know why I put that there. Intravenous. I think it is something that they do use, but I think that's a mistake right there. So baths. So this should be a favorite for many people because it's a multi-modality administrative therapeutic task. So it's transdermal. It's you can use chamomile as a tea, but then you can also add it to your bath and it will stimulate the tissues. You can also add oats to your bath to help with skin issues. And also if you have any skin issues, you can add chickweed, which is a very common weed that people want to get rid of. But if you collect chickweed and you add that to your bath, then that will help with eczema, cirrhosis, and other skin issues. Okay. Ointments. Ointments are thick layers or thin layers of like a salve applied to an area where it's either left open or it's applied thickly and then wrapped with a bandage, and then it's left to be absorbed directly into the skin. So it can be semi-solid or it can be quite light, but semi-solid is better. Okay, so brothers and sisters, thank you very much for your time. I'm going to stop here, but tomorrow when we go through the sessions, I'll continue from here, but we're going to be looking at herbs and identifying tips to identify different herbs. Okay. So thank you very much for your time.
I'm fascinated by his the way he demonstrates when he presents. I've never seen that before. It's beautiful. It's very effective. I'm saying I'm fascinated by the way he demonstrates when he's presenting. In Genesis 1:29, God says, after creating man in his own image, he says, God says, behold, I've given you every herb bearing seed, which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree in which is the fruit of a tree, yielding seed to you shall be for meat. So God is saying the herbs are actually supposed to be our food, and our food is supposed to be the medicine. So whatever we put in our mouth, I think we have to consider what we're eating. I'll give a quick testimony. I came to the prayer retreat 2 years ago, and I've had a migraine for 20 years, and I've suffered with this migraine, and I've stopped work many, many times. So when I came, I shared the chalet with Pastor Marvelous, and in the morning I couldn't wake up. So when he came, I said to him, I have a headache. All he said was, does anybody have rosemary? I think Sister V had rosemary in the fridge. All he said was, from now henceforth, your tea shall be the rosemary.
Amen.
I took that rosemary and I wanted to come and personally to thank him because the migraines are gone. They were actually caused by the radiators. So if I sit next to a radiator, the central heating will cause me the headaches, but now it doesn't affect me anymore. And these herbs, we actually get them from the allotment. They are free anyway. I don't have to buy. So it's just to say thank you. And these herbs, I've driven past them so many times. I didn't know that is the remedy. So just to say that everything that God has made, it has a purpose on the face of the earth. I might be ignorant of what it is, but God knows why He created it. So now I believe that God never made any junk. So what we see, I mean, on the soil, we may not understand what it is for, but there is a purpose, there is a use for it. So we would like to thank Brother Gayle for that presentation. That is just like a taster. He is yet to come. He is coming back on Friday. Tomorrow. He will come on Friday and then he will come tomorrow and then he'll come on Friday for the presentation. And then there's health checks again, I'm told, this afternoon. So between now and 11, there's stalls at the back. And then from 12 o'clock, there's a presentation by Elder Shokora. So I would like to thank him for the presentation that he has done. We'll have a word of prayer and then we'll close for now. Let us pray. Merciful Father in heaven, Lord, we pause at this moment to thank you. We thank you for the time that you have given us with Brother Gayle. I pray, Lord, that as you continue to present these wonderful messages concerning the health and the herbs and how we should use them, I pray, Lord, that the Holy Spirit will continue to give him wisdom and knowledge so that he may be able to present this message that is very critical and very important at this time when we are so surrounded with so many doctors that are very happy to prescribe medicine and tablets of any type. Whether we go to the doctor and say we are feeling happy, they'll prescribe something for us. If we are sad, they'll prescribe something for us. Therefore, Lord, you have told us that our food is supposed to be the herbs, and the herbs is supposed to be the medicine for us. Therefore, Lord, we are truly grateful and thankful for Brother Gayle that you have used in a mighty way, and I pray that you continue to use him so that we may benefit in a mighty way. Be with him and be with his wife. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Just right for now.